Canada's federal leaders have been busy on the campaign trail, once again promising to spend billions upon billions of dollars on a wide range of programs. Things have also been getting a little bit intense at some of the recent rallies. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Brian, this week, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau said we deserve to know about candidates facing allegations of sexual misconduct, but according to recent reports, Trudeau also defended a Liberal candidate, and it sounded like a bit like a double standard. Can you explain?
Well, so on Monday, he was asked about a Conservative candidate who had been turfed by the Tories for allegations of sexual misconduct, a guy in Halifax, Dartmouth area named Troy Myers. And Trudeau said, he was asked, well, would you get rid of one of your candidates if they faced similar allegations? And he said, absolutely. And Canadians deserve to know about serious allegations against candidates. Well, fast forward to the next day, Tuesday, and he's asked about allegations against the Kitchener, Ontario area Liberal MP, guy named Raj Sani, who, according to the reporting, it dates back to 2015, following around women at the Christmas party, being what described as touchy and handsy, being an abusive boss, driving one staffer to the point of attempting suicide, and others of making sure that they don't show up alone with him. So Trudeau's asked about that, and he stood by Sani and said, well, there's a process in place, and we have to follow these. Well, it's very different than 2018, before his own groping allegation came out, when Trudeau said that when women come forward, we need to believe them. Now he seems to be saying, well, women experience things differently, and I'm going to stand by my man.
Brian, the Trudeau Liberals have also been facing increased protests in both British Columbia and Ontario. Now, Trudeau himself described this as an anger not seen in Canadian politics ever before. But now you've covered the political beat like I have, and you say this is simply not true?
Yeah, if you look at recent history, or even history, get into the Wayback Machine with Mr. Peabody, and you can find it with his father, with Brian Mulroney, with Stephen Harper, with Jean Chrétien. This is not new to politics, and he should know that. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. 1968, Pierre Trudeau has just recently become prime minister through a leadership race. He's facing a general election. He's at the Saint Jean-Baptiste parade in Montreal. Riots break out. Bottles are thrown at him. Separatists were angry that he even showed up. He didn't flinch. He just sat there as they were throwing bottles at him. 1982, he takes a vacation with his three sons. So Justin's on the train. There was so much food thrown at this thing. And this is the famous train ride where he gave a certain type of rude salute to people in Salmon Arm, BC. They threw so much food that they dubbed the train the Caesar Salad Express. Jean Chrétien did the famous Shawinigan handshake. Mila Mulrooney was hit with a sign post at a protest in New Brunswick. Stephen Harper, at his first campaign event in 2015, had someone was arrested for uttering threats. And of course, the Liberals also posted a photo of Harper with his face over top of Lee Harvey Oswald's during the famous assassination photo. So, yeah, the idea that this is new, that it's solely aimed at Justin Trudeau, they can try and do that. And I think they're doing it because nothing else has worked on the campaign, and that's some of the best media coverage they've received was over those protests, but it's simply not accurate.
Now, Brian, Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole continues to campaign on economic issues. First, he talked about the affordability crisis. Then he discussed how the Tories would pay down the debt. Is he saying a lot of this to appease fiscal conservatives?
Well, some of what he's talking about is actually angering fiscal conservatives, people like my colleague Lauren Gunter at The Sun, not happy with O'Toole's platform, saying it spends too much and that we need to tighten the belt quick and soon, saying be more like Thatcher and Reagan. And while that can be appealing to people, that's not the mindset that the country is in at the moment. When we're talking about Reagan and Thatcher, they came to power at particular times when people were fed up with big government. And while Canadians can definitely see that we need to rein things in, they're still very nervous about the pandemic. So I don't think you could go with that message. So, yeah, he's going to take longer to pay down the deficit. He's talking about doing it over 10 years. But even that is being portrayed by much of the media is he's going to cut, cut, cut. He's going to slash. And that's what the Liberals are trying to do. So he's trying to reassure Canadians that no, he'll pay down the deficit in a responsible, reasonable way, that he's not going to slash things that people need in the middle of the pandemic. But, he's also talking about pocketbook issues for individual families, like getting out of the way getting government out of the way in certain instances with business to lower costs so that we can have more affordable internet or mobile phone, freeing up a bunch of government land to lower the price of housing, things like that, that I think will resonate with people because affordability and the cost of living are both very big issues.
Now, Brian, we saw inflation numbers jump in the first week of the campaign, and that became a bit of an issue. Now, Stats Canada says the economy is contracting, it's shrinking. Will that impact the campaign at all?
Well, it might. It all depends on how much voters latch onto it or what Justin Trudeau says. And if you remember, when the inflation numbers came out and he was asked about monetary policy, which drives inflation numbers, he said he doesn't think much about monetary policy. Well, about an hour and a half after StatsCan said the economy contracted, in a significant way in the latest quarter, Justin Trudeau was standing in a suburban Ottawa campaign event saying the economy has bounced back tremendously. So if he keeps putting his foot in it, then it will hurt him. Because, yeah, people do vote on the economy. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their kids' future. They're worried about their own future. And so, yeah, economic issues, big and small, become very important on the campaign. And he's got to watch what he's saying because he wants to campaign against Stephen Harper and he keeps bringing him up, but he's been in power for 6 years now, which he likes to remind everyone and then says he wants 4 more. You can't blame a guy who's been out of power for 6 years for how the economy's doing now. And so this could become a major headache for him and his party going forward.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh brought out a policy you actually agree with. Now, this may actually be a first on Bridge City News. What policy is that?
He's talking about going after offshore tax havens, and that's something that the term populist is often just seen as horrible these days. Donald Trump was a populist, so all populism is bad. But look, we've had left-wing populism in Canada, right-wing populism, prairie populism, all kinds over the years, and there are policies that maybe they don't have an anchoring in a particular political philosophy, but they appeal to people. They are popular. And I think this is one of those. You and I are, well, unless you're hiding bags of money I don't know about how, you and I don't have the ability to hire accountants to set up family trusts in the Cayman Islands. And yet lots of Canadians have done this. It's been exposed through this thing called the Paradise Papers, brought out in 2017. It showed 2 generations of Trudeau Liberal fundraisers, Leo Kolbler, the former late senator who was Pierre Trudeau's key fundraiser, and Stephen Bronfman, who's Justin Trudeau's main fundraiser, of the Bronfman family, of the Seagram fortune. These people with tons of cash keeping it offshore. Why? To avoid paying Canadian taxes. There are rules on if you do that, how it has to be done. We know that many Canadians have violated these rules, but the Trudeau Liberals have not cracked down on it. As I said in a recent column, they don't want to upset their friends in Westmount, Montreal's very tony, high-income neighborhoods, where this is something that has been done. But I think this is something both the NDP and the Conservatives would find a lot of their supporters, and a lot of Liberals would say, you know what? I have to pay my fair share of taxes. You want to talk about paying fair shares? Let's stop people from hiding money to avoid paying taxes.
One of the main Liberal promises is to crack down on house flippers, including a huge tax on that practice, Brian. It's portrayed as a way of really cooling down some of the markets in Canada, like Vancouver. But you say a Liberal candidate in that city in Vancouver flipped not 10, 20, 30, but 40 houses?
Yeah, enterprising reporter from a local media outlet in Vancouver said, well, they heard Trudeau's promise and thought, well, wait a minute, hasn't Talib Nur Mohammed been known for making a lot of money? We're talking $5 million off flipping houses. So they went through the land registry records. More than 40 houses, Hal, since 2015. And more than 20 of them were held for less than a year. And he's made $5 million off this. So, what's interesting is that when Justin Trudeau describes his policies, he campaigns from a very moralistic sounding point of view. He doesn't just say that the people who do this are wrong, he makes them sound evil and that he's the cure for this evil. Well, one of his candidates is doing that. You would think this would be a problem. Mr. Nur Mohammed had been put out by the Liberals several times to speak to media and do interviews on diversity in Canadian politics and the need for more people of color to be in politics. But ever since this broke, he's refused media requests from all the local media and national media as well. He's simply not available. He's out campaigning, Hal.
No, you should really be talking about the keys on effectively flipping houses. I mean, that's really what you should be talking about here. Now, Brian, this capital gains tax amounts to a tax on your primary residence, and I thought this was something the Liberals promised never, ever to do.
Yeah, so this is their anti-house flipping tax, is their promise to deal with people like Talib Nur Mohammed, their candidate, and I think he's running in the riding formerly held by Jody Wilson-Raybould, Vancouver, Granville. They said that they'll bring an anti-house flipping tax. It is a capital gains tax, Hal, and they had said they would not do this. If you remember back to before the last election, and I believe we discussed it here on Bridge City News, that the Liberals had a policy proposal out to have a tax on selling your house of 50% of the profits if you held it for less than a year. I think it went down to 25% after 2 years, then 10, then 5 after 5 years, and so on. So this was a policy that was presented, it was discussed, they decided not to go ahead with it. And they've been very touchy about anyone who raises the issue. When people write stories or write columns about it, they get very touchy and they deny they're ever going to do this. Well, here it is. It's in their party platform. Now, the party platform only says if you sell the house after living in it for less than a year. But once you've brought that in, how long until they say, well, let's make it 2 years, let's make it 3, let's make it 5?
Right.
At what point do they stop? This is something they said they would never do. Now that it's in their platform, if you remember before the last election, they said they would never raise the carbon tax. That is not under consideration. It will not be done. And then, of course, what did they do? They announced that they would raise it from $50 a ton to $170 a ton. That is a significant raise. So I'm not going to believe them when they say it's just for this one thing and we won't do it to anyone else.
Brian, polls continue to be trotted out showing a fairly tight race during this election campaign. The most recent polls show the Conservatives with a slight lead, and some of the polls have the Liberals with the edge. Now, Brian, you say those are not the numbers to watch. Which ones are?
The numbers to look at are things like how people feel about the leader, negative or positive impressions, job performance approval ratings, things like that. You know, I pointed in a recent column to the Angus Reid Institute poll. Now, their poll, most recent one that I've seen, has the Conservatives at 33%, the Liberals at 30%. Now, that's a snapshot in time. If you want to know where it's going after that, you look at the other question. They asked people, if you were voting just with your gut or heart, or you were voting just with your reason and intellect, who would you vote for? On the gut and heart question, 33% said, if it was just down to my gut, I'd vote for Jagmeet Singh, the NDP. 31% said they would vote for Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives. Only 23% said voting with their heart, they would pick Justin Trudeau. Now, when you ask them intellect, well, 36% said, if I'm voting with my brains and reason, I'll vote for Erin O'Toole. Trudeau was second, but he was at 29%. These are not good numbers for him. Ipsos has, Trudeau has the highest unfavorability rating of any party leader. He's at 53% say, I don't like him. That's higher than Maxime Bernier, who's at 52% and is vilified everywhere he goes in the media. So that's a bad sign for Justin Trudeau. You've got Angus Reid and Leger showing that both Singh and O'Toole are going up in their favorable impressions. Trudeau is going down. That tells you that there isn't a lot of room for growth. The Liberals have to figure out something to change this, or they're going to be changing seats come September 21st.
The turmoil in Afghanistan dominated questions in the first 2 weeks of the campaign. Brian, 1,000 Canadians still want to leave that war-torn country. Now, with Canada's operations wrapped up, how will these Canadians get home? Will the Taliban let them leave?
That is something that's, believe it or not, still being negotiated with the Taliban. And as much as it pains me to say that, they are in control now. This was a planned exit, one that was negotiated with Donald Trump, followed up on by Joe Biden. We had left the country a long time ago. So, yeah, we do have to negotiate with them now that they are in charge. And we're trying to get them out. But a lot of people are just trying to flee across the land border to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is the benefactor of the Taliban. They are effectively in control of the Taliban. I'm not sure that it's going to be a lot better for those people going to refugee camps in Pakistan. Uh, all the parties have pledged to bring at least 20,000 refugees, but those are people that have already left Afghanistan. They're not the people who are left behind. This is heartbreaking, but you can already see how that it's dropping off the campaign agenda. It's not the lead question anymore. Now that the Americans are out, now that we're out, it's not driving the agenda the way it did. And I think it will continue to fade a bit. But still, a lot of Canadians want to make sure that the people that helped us are out. A lot of people want to make sure that the veterans that are trying to get the help they need. So let's hope that happens.
Yeah, I mean, Foreign Affairs Minister Mark Garneau says, yeah, we have to negotiate with the Taliban right now. How do you negotiate with a known terrorist entity? It's going to be a real challenge. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Hal.